Sorry. Screen 2. Share. There we go.
Okay. Pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, individual, liberty, and justice for all. We'll take a moment of silence for our first responders, our servicemen, and all those that keep us safe. Okay, thank you. This meeting will be recorded. Mark is recording it. I guess, where's it get posted to?
Yep, it'll be posted right to YouTube. It's live on YouTube right now. So if you're, if we have anyone listening in on YouTube, welcome.
Okay.
Just a couple of housekeeping items real quick, Ernie.
Go ahead.
The chairman will ask for any public comment on agenda items. Audience members who wish to make comments must unmute by hitting *6 if you're on the telephone, and on your screen if you're using Zoom. Identify yourself with your name and address to ask questions and make comments. Please state your name and address, and please speak one at a time. And if you're on the phone and you're using the live stream, just turn the volume down on YouTube. And there's also a new feature in Zoom for *9 if you want to raise your hands, but we have a small group, so we shouldn't need that.
Is that all?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Looking at the tracking log, it doesn't look like we have anything on or coming up. I saw where the solar ordinance was passed by the board. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. Yep.
Okay, and if I'm reading this right, we have nothing else coming up, correct?
That's true. We do not have anything coming up at the moment.
Okay. Going to the meeting minutes. Any comment on the meeting minutes?
Okay, look good.
I have none.
None. Ruth, I just have one, I guess, vain comment. Line 44, page 1, where it says Ernie was opposed. I usually just go by Ernest for official stuff. Ernie's fine,
Okay. Okay.
but just to be vain, that's all, because sometimes I just get confused with my father, who's no longer here, but that's just a habit, so I appreciate it.
Okay, I'll fix it.
All right, minutes are approved, no comments.
Good job, Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have two things I want to go through tonight. We'll go through the first thing is the old business, which is high intensity uses and pipeline consideration. There's two listed there, the memo and then the review of the first draft of the ordinance. Mark had sent out, what came out in the package wasn't the final draft. I think Mark had sent out a final draft of what that should have been. Has everyone received that and had a chance to take a look at it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Christine, I know you're on the phone. Had you seen a copy of that?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I only had a chance to see it today when I saw the agenda.
Okay. Well, we can get you a copy of what he sent out. It's just a rough draft, but basically what was in the package, if you look at what was in the package, the only part that it's just really the first part, 205 section 40.1. The second part was actually not supposed to be there. That was part of his draft work. So we'll go through that. I have a couple, we had talked about this last meeting, and we had gone through, because we had done a number of things. There was been quite a bit of work done, and looking at the various issues, what was done and reviewed it. We've come up with three suggestions the last meeting we talked about. Dave Shuey had recommended possibly looking at an awareness ordinance. We talked through that, and this is the first draft. So Mark, you want to speak to this a little bit?
Sure. So after some thought and thinking about what we do with other types of development, different studies and plans that are required, I thought, why wouldn't we want to require some type of pipeline plan or a hazard mitigation study of some type. So I talked with Rick about it a little bit, and Kristen, who just joined us on the call as well, and started cobbling that together. And I apologize for the really rough nature of the first one. I was having a lot of computer difficulties working at home, and couldn't get in to fix it. So Rick threw it in there. But what I have shared on the screen here is the pipeline hazardous mitigation study draft, and this would be in addition to the subdivision and land development ordinance. It would fall right underneath water study and traffic study that we typically do for large developments. This would kick in when a development is somewhere in some proximity to a pipeline easement. And looking through some of the literature out there online, there's a lot of model ordinances, and I did find some awareness ordinances and some consultation zone ordinances. And I know we had chat about that as well. So if we wanted to include something more significant than this, we can definitely do that. But this is a first blush at what we thought would be would get the planning side of things identified early on in the process, and it wouldn't shock a developer when they came through. It's right there in the ordinance, right under subdivision land development. What plans do they need to submit? It's right there, and they so they know it up front.
Anything else, Mark?
That's it in a nutshell, right?
All right, I'll go around to the planning commission members if they have any comments. Dan? I'm sorry, who did I cut off?
Well, Dan, Ernie, I'd like to see if Kristen could weigh in a little bit here, and maybe everyone can think about the thoughts of, what the implications are from the legal side.
That's fine. I was going to ask her last, but she's more than happy. Kristen, you're more than welcome to go first.
Okay. Well, I think it's a great, I think of all the ordinances, Mark mentioned there's lots of different ways to skin this cat, but I think this is the one that probably ends up getting the most useful information from a planning perspective at the outset, and could potentially, require plan revisions, plan edits that would maybe, hopefully be meaningful and hopefully achieve the purpose, which is to place development in the most the best location where it's the least impacted by existing pipelines. So I think it's helpful. And I think that it, within the subdivision land development ordinance, everybody just has to understand, I'm sure you do, is that it only applies then to an application that somebody files seeking to subdivide or develop their property. It would be one of the things I thought that the township should do before this ordinance, gets too much further down the pike and gets before the board, is to really, and maybe somebody in the planning commission has this expertise, I sure don't, is understanding if this type of a study is submitted, what all should be submitted with it? Like what information do we need to know about the pipeline beyond just the location, the dimension, the materials that are transported? What about the characteristics of the material that's being transported, and how does that have an impact upon what should be built around it, and buffers and things like that? So I think somebody who has knowledge in that, and I'm not sure if that's a civil engineer who specializes in, pipelines would have that information or not. But I think, you really want to you don't want to just have them do a study for the sake of having them do a study. It's like, check the box. You filed an EIA, you filed a traffic study, you filed this study. If this study is going to have if it's going to really have a good purpose, we need to make sure that it's a robust study that is required, and that it has the information that the planning commission and the board really can use to shift around or change the development, that otherwise is allowed under your codes. So as I said to Mark, I think it's a great first start. I think, again, just beefing it up in terms of what is it that you really want to have in this study so that you can use it for the purposes that it's intended.
Okay. Anything else, Kristen?
That's it.
Okay. I'll go around to the Planning Commission members, comments? I'll go down my list here. Dan, do you have any comments?
I think it's good. Good job, Mark and Kristen here, if you helped out with that. I guess my initial comment, my first comment here was related to prepared by a professional engineer specializing in pipeline design and pipeline hazard mitigation. So I'm just running through that and saying, well, who is that? Who are they hiring to do that work then? I'm a civil engineer, for those who don't know, and deal with land development projects. Do I specialize in pipeline design or pipeline hazard mitigation? No, I don't. Ultimately here, what you'd be looking for then is be getting somebody who is who works for pipelines. That's who you're going to end up with. You're going to be hiring an engineering firm that works for a pipeline company that do pipeline work, and of course they have a vested interest to continue those relationships. So I don't know the answer to this, and I just want to, I guess, bring it to you guys' attention here. What exactly that is, and whether or not we would accept, the township would accept a pipeline hazard mitigation study prepared by a civil engineer who doesn't have hazard mitigation expertise. So that's a question you got to think through.
Yeah, let me just comment on that. That's a good point, because I actually had it circled too. Today I was reviewing that. I think a few of you guys are professional engineers, if I'm not mistaken. I know I'm a professional engineer, and I know typically when you get your professional engineering license by the profession and by your license, you really can only work on things that you believe from a professional standpoint that you had the experience to work on. And the bottom line is that if you work on something where you don't, then you could be challenged in court. So it's really on the responsibility of the professional engineer to decide whether he is able to actually comment on pipeline design or pipeline hazard mitigation. And my thought was just, if the statement was just a pipeline hazard prepared by a professional engineer, should be sufficient under the laws of the state and the rules and requirements for professional engineering, that should be sufficient. Does that make sense to you, Dan, or anybody else?
I guess ultimately here is I don't know the answer to that, because then you're going to get the engineer who has never dealt with the pipeline hazard mitigation work and understanding, well, hey, this is what's in that pipeline and the impacts that pipeline could end up having on here. And until Sunoco came through here, I was not aware of, hey, a pipeline's a pipeline, and didn't necessarily think through here the material that's being transported through that pipeline. And obviously that has a large the material within the pipeline is significantly impacts the hazards that are going to be present with that line. So I don't know the answer to that. If you just basically say a professional engineer, I mean, ultimately here is you're going to get somebody preparing this who, hey, I mean, who's going to go through and a lot of this stuff can show, hey, the plan showing underground utilities, driveway entrances, and a plan showing that for hydrants and stuff like that. Those are any civil engineer could go ahead and prepare. The mitigation measures is what you need to look at and kind of understand what's going to happen to these pipelines if there is a hazard that's going to occur. I don't know. I guess I got to think that through a little bit more, and I think it's going to be kind of maybe open-ended here right now, at least in my opinion. But it's something I think we need to think through here exactly what we want to end up doing on here. That kind of rolls into the content, I guess here is when you're dealing with what needs to be within the study. I guess ultimately here is having that discussion here about what is the use of that pipeline. And of course, as we well know now, with the Sunoco and the changes to the pipeline, they have the right and the ability to change that material without necessarily getting approvals from really anybody to allow them to change the material within the pipe. So, but I think that the content information should end up listing and discussing what's in that pipeline, and that's going to have to be something that's going to have consultation with the pipeline companies. They're going to have dialogue and open that. This study should address that aspect of it, and spelling out here, well, what is within these pipelines. And currently, it doesn't necessarily say that's going to be that's all that's going to be in it. So I think that content aspect of it should end up addressing that, an assessment of the actual material being transported within the pipeline. And then I guess the other part that I had kind of scribbled some notes here on this was related to if this came in as a conditional use application, obviously the township would have the right to put reasonable conditions on based upon this study here that's being done, and that could be something could be assessed during the conditional use phase. And I guess if it comes in as a by right use, this study is going to be used to help for the planning stage, but there aren't really any teeth that can make them have changes to this, which I guess kind of relies back on what we necessarily some of the past discussions that we had about, hey, property owners have certain rights to the use of their property, and some of the discussions and our desires not to impose setbacks. But I guess ultimately here, I think this is going to be most useful for those applications that are going through the conditional use, because at that point here, we have the ability to put some reasonable conditions on a plan. But I guess ultimately here for a by right use that's going through the land development process here, this study we can help try to guide the developers or the property owner to doing something to address some mitigation aspects associated with this, but we won't. And I guess this is just more of a statement than anything else. It's not necessarily suggesting we should change it, but it doesn't give us a lot of teeth to make changes. So,
well, Dan, can I jump in on that? Because I think that's a really great point, that I feel like there's a sentence or a clause sort of missing at the end of this section. And that should be that, okay, once we get the study, what do we do with that study, and how does that change what the applicant's required to do on their plan? So, you know, when you have, for example, I'm thinking of like a traffic impact study, you have, and now your ordinance section would say who has to prepare it, what all it has to study, what's the scope of the intersections that they're looking at. And then, you know, I don't have your ordinance memorized, but some ordinances say that you have to demonstrate either as part of land development or as part of conditional use that your development will not decrease the level of service at the surrounding intersections below a level of service C, or whatever it is, like whatever the standard is that the applicant has to demonstrate. And so I feel like the end of this section should have some sort of, okay, now you've submitted the study, what is it either the applicant's burden to do with the study and to demonstrate, or is there some affirmative statement that says that given the information provided in the study, you know, the applicant shall demonstrate that the proposed development, you know, and this is just off the cuff here, like is in the most suitable location to prevent hazards resulting from the nearby pipeline or something like that. Like there should be a standard that an applicant does have a burden to meet, even in just a by right subdivision land development. Because I failed to mention one of the first comments when I went through this ordinance is I'm not sure in terms of applicability, I don't think it's necessary to have it apply to every single conditional use application, because your zoning ordinance has a lot of conditional use applications that just deal with the use of an existing building or, you know, accessory use like a home occupation, things like that. That seems like overkill to me for every type of conditional use that East Goshen zoning ordinance requires. it seems to me like where you're really going to want this study is where you're proposing new development. And so I'm not sure you necessarily need it in all conditional use applications, but I don't disagree that if without a final culminating sentence or paragraph that establishes a standard for an applicant to meet based on this study, it's not really going to be very helpful in a by right development.
Can't they ask for a waiver?
You can always ask for a waiver, but this wouldn't be the one. This isn't a, it's not like, this wouldn't be a section that would be easy to demonstrate that a waiver is justifiable.
We rarely would waive a traffic study when there's a new development. There's a new commercial development of some type, or even residential development.
So I agree with Kristen. I think that ultimately that concluding statement here is something I think would be was really where my mind was going, and I didn't necessarily was able to think that through to that finishing line. But I agree. I think that would be a good thing to add to the end of this the section of the ordinance. And I guess, Mark, as I was just talking there, the version that I printed out here, which I think today, it didn't have, you listed on their materials transported. I guess I didn't see that on this version. Is that something that?
Yeah, this new red line version I put up was comments from Kristen last night. So
okay,
I worked it through just to have.
Okay, so
just so I'm clear, I know Kristen made a
transported.
comment.
Is the that's what I was looking for. That's what one of my first statements were, that I think that ultimately having that material in there is, and I guess knowing that material is very critical on the impacts of what could end up happening.
Okay, I know there was a comment, Kristen, you had made also that you didn't think that it would be needed as part of the conditional use. I think that's in an email you sent to Mark. Was that was the discussion you just had? And I think Mark has kind of redlined this number 4. So I'm gonna take notes here of stuff we need to go back and look at the change on this, and I'll just write that down as one of the notes. Any other comments, Dan?
So Kristen, I agree with the conditional use aspect. Do you think we're able to just strike that section that says conditional use, or do we end up adding a conditional use that involves a land development application?
You could do a conditional use that involves, well, maybe that was too quick to say. I mean, I think maybe we want to look at all the different uses that are allowed by conditional use and then think through that. Maybe not totally strike, because maybe, for example, maybe there's an existing building. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. I'm thinking that if you have an existing building and the use changes and the nature of the use goes from something where there really is no, it isn't, for example, today it's a warehouse building and there's very few people that are going there. And then the use changes to be a school where obviously there's a more concern about the number of people and the occupants of that building, but the building's already there. So I'm not sure what else you could do about it. So I think we just want to maybe focus on conditional use applications that would require, new buildings, new structures. But I think that's covered anyway, because you would always
Land development.
that's land development.
You would go through land development.
Yeah.
So let me just for efficiency here, let me just say that that's an area we need to look at. Okay,
Yep.
I think we've
Let
got
me ask another
comments.
question, Ernie, if you don't mind. So if you were changing a use for a property and there wasn't any development, they would not be subject to the subdivision land development ordinance, correct?
Correct.
So then ultimately here this wouldn't even come into play because this is part of the subdivision land development ordinance.
Right.
Unless there was some type of improvements that were required outside. And Mark, let me ask you this question here. So back across the street from the township building there, the school that used to be whatever, the IBM building that got transferred into a school use. There really were no improvements, but I remember going through, I guess it went through conditional use, but didn't go through land development.
Did not.
So that right there would this section of the ordinance would not kick in.
Right, but Dan, what would you do with it? So the building's already there. So you have a study done, the pipe's there, the building's there. What are you going to change?
I guess the only part of it would be, is it appropriate to have that school on next to a pipeline. I mean,
Well,
but
that
You
decision's
allow
already
the
been made.
use in the district.
That decision's already been made when the board said that that's an appropriate conditional use in that zoning district.
correct. So ultimately, the only way you would prohibit that is if we decided to do that would be is by changing that use, and that's changing that wouldn't be addressed by this. But regardless, I guess where I was going with it is that change from the office building to a school did not require land development. Therefore, this study would not have been required.
That's correct. If
Okay.
you
So
take
the way-
out, if you take out 4, if you take out paragraph 4.
But
Yeah,
but
The
even if 4 is in there, it wouldn't still come into play
Oh,
because
that's right.
because
That's
they're
right.
not they're not subject to the subdivision land development ordinance.
Right, unless you have a cross reference in the zoning.
we'd have to
to-
have a cross-reference over that.
Yeah. Yep.
So let me just, not to try and fix it here, but let me just, I'll jot that down as somewhere we need to look at that change of use, whether it be proper wording here or whether it's tied to something. That's just something we have to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any more on your dime, Dan?
I don't think so. Those are my initial thoughts and notes that I had on this.
Yeah, Kristen, I don't know if you have any experience with the comment made on the professional engineering. I know from my perspective, I think just saying professional engineer is sufficient, that it's upon the engineer's license to know he can actually stamp that type of work.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, or does it have to be something that's specific?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny representing West Goshen when we were dealing with Sunoco, it was virtually impossible to find anybody that didn't work for the pipeline industry, right? So I
Right.
think Dan's point's well taken. But I actually think it might be 2 different fields. I mean, somebody who understands pipeline design and, that may be a different field than somebody who understands pipeline hazard mitigation. To me, it's almost like there's an emergency management field that is the second part of that. So, I mean, you guys are the engineers. Tell me if I'm wrong on that. I wouldn't
No,
think it'd be the.
you're 100% correct. For example, I actually would feel under my license, I could actually comment on pipeline design, but as far as pipeline hazard mitigation, there's a section I wouldn't. So it's something I would have to determine as a PE what I would feel comfortable about doing. So I think just the term. I don't know who spoke up. I think just a term by a professional engineer, and then the laws of Pennsylvania and licensing of engineering should cover that. I think I talked over somebody.
What if we said a licensed professional engineer with experience with pipelines or something more generic? We don't just want,
I would just say, if you want to do that, I would just say with the appropriate experience.
with the appropriate experience.
Appropriate discipline. That's all.
Okay.
Because you're getting into the laws of professional engineering, and they're pretty specific about, it's real. They put the weight is put on the actual engineer, and that's why he's licensed. That's why you go through the 2.5 days of exams and the whole bit.
And what would happen here is you're going to get somebody who doesn't have the experience, who's going
Right.
to submit something in. It's going to get submitted. It's going to then be reviewed by Pennoni, and they're going to say, "Hey, you haven't addressed this adequately,"
Right.
and ask them to add more information in. So that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a iteration here of a submission, and hey, this is inadequate. Submit more information and comments and address it. So,
Is that something, Kristen, that during the land development approval process, they'd have to prevent their CV and say, they have some kind of experience with pipelines, or?
Well, I think it's more just on the quality of the work product that's submitted. And as Dan mentioned, if it's crap, it's crap. And Pennoni sees that, and they can comment back and say, this isn't robust enough. And I mean, whoever submits it, we have the ability to check what the person's credentials and areas of expertise are. So I think that can be ripped apart if it's somebody that, went out on a limb and didn't, wasn't as professional as Ernie's suggesting that people need to be in terms of their licensing. But I think it can be ripped apart by our engineers reviewing it and commenting on it and saying it needs to be more robust. I do want to say one other thing, though, is that maybe one of the content section. I mean, I know that, for example, some of the conditional use standards might say that an applicant has to go and get a review by the fire marshal, for example. So maybe part of it is that we put the burden on the applicant to consult with emergency management, people in the emergency management field, the governmental agencies, whether it's the emergency management coordinator of the township or at the county level, and have them comment upon either providing them information or a component part of the plan. That was something else I was thinking in terms of, again, thinking it's two different fields. It's an engineer on the pipeline design, but it's somebody more in the emergency management field for the hazard mitigation.
Okay. I think that's some good comments. We got to work that into some depth, but I think that's some good comments. You've got those, Mark. I've got a list of comments here too, Mark.
Ernie, I don't know if, am I allowed to speak at this point? It's Christina.
I'll give you all the time you want. Let me just get through the commission members and I'll let you speak with whatever you'd like to talk to. Okay, thank you. Is that all, Dan?
Yes, that's it for me.
Okay. Ed, do you have any comments?
No, honestly, Ernie, I didn't get a chance to take a look at Mark's revisions that were sent out now that we're back to homeschooling and with work commitments this week. So I apologize. So
Sounds like a good homeschooling project.
Oh, it's yeah. Yeah. If we want a 6-year-old reviewing this, I'm all for handing it over. I'm pretty sure she has appropriate experience in hazard mitigation planning. So,
Mike Koza, do you have any questions? Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're working through some of the concerns with the conditional use. I mean, my initial review is I'm worried it's too restrictive. I really wouldn't want it like involving like, a property owner that's trying to do something on land they own. And I don't know, I'd have to go back and really look at what a conditional use and how that could, like, what kind of like practical standpoint that could be that would like cause somebody that's doing some minor, residential change to have to go out and hire some type of, we're still working through the language, but hazard mitigation engineer and put the study together and pay for it to prove back to the township that they're not impacting, a pipeline. So I do have some things that I'd like to look more into it because I don't like it initially. I mean, I guess here's my initial question is like, I thought we talked about doing like we called it, if I understood it in the past meetings, would be like a pipeline awareness, like
awareness ordinance. Yes.
Yeah. So my understanding was that if somebody was coming to develop, we would just make them aware of like the existing pipelines, like so that, and then they would, hopefully take that into consideration and we'd work with them to develop something where this to me is kind of turned into like I mean, at least the way I'm looking at it from my angle is a conflict of interest where we're putting the onus on the owner to hire somebody that may or may not like exist. And it seems like most of the people that do exist are going to be biased. I know if I was the owner, I'd find like a biased person that's going to work in my favor to prove back to us that the pipelines don't have any effect on what they're going to do. Now, granted, in a perfect world, I guess the best case scenario would be like they wanted to build something, they would hire somebody, they would say, look, we still want you to build it, but why don't you move your stair from the east elevation to the north elevation and everything's going to cost the same and everything's great and everybody's happy. But it just seems like there's more problems in the real world than solutions that would come out of it. So that's my initial thing. But a couple questions, I guess, like the 1,000 foot, is that like the I remember hearing different, setbacks recommended. Did that come from like those discussions or some study? Is that where that came from?
That was a number that we just kind of threw out there as a placeholder to discuss. Okay. Most of the literature, Mike, shows 660 feet as a standard for planning for development near a pipeline. And that has something to do with some critical effects area. If there was a
zone blast, it's the zone in the blast zone. That's all it is. Blast zone, whatever you want to call it. I
just threw it in there as a placeholder for now.
I have comments on that too, Mike.
Got it. And then
Mike, can I just let me make a comment. I understand what you just went through about your concern, and one of the things that I was thinking or looking at was once the study is done, the real reason and part of the discussion is, what do you do with it? Down in the content section where you plan, where you get a chance to show things like the underground utility, driveway entrance, hydrants, equipment. I was going to add something like equipment access for emergency vehicles. That kind of like gives you, that allows you to say, well, I've addressed these certain issues by doing, X, Y, and Z. And I don't know if that helps you, but I think the answer to to part of the question is, knowing that you have the study done, then you could put in things like this that would mitigate any potential issues. That's my point.
Okay. So we can talk about, it sounds like the 1,000-foot thing's like up in the air for now, it's a placeholder. But then I guess we're treating, first off, do we have pipeline defined? Is that like a 1/2-inch natural gas line is going to have an easement? Is that a pipeline, or is there like a specific definition somewhere that defines a pipeline?
Good question. I don't.
Mark, do you have that?
I do not know the answer at this second, but
Like in our head, we're all thinking like whatever it is, the 8, 9, 10, 11 pipelines in the East Coast. But if you really start peeling it back and you're like, man, there's a natural gas line at the end of my driveway, like there's easements everywhere.
Okay, now that's a good point. We need to define that. That's a good point.
yeah, I had
Okay.
a section and I scratched it for now because I hadn't gotten that far. So
All right,
Okay.
I know it's a work in progress. These are just things that are popping up. And then, I know this has been kicked around every which way, and it's very problematic to craft language for, but is there, because you can move, your easements can change, you can always add new pipes, different sizes, different materials. So, or is our intent, I guess, the only way we can do it is have a blanket language for all pipelines, however we define them? Because I understand that the target can move, but if you're 500 feet away from a 6-inch, and I'm just throwing out things, 6-inch oil line versus I'm thinking like 18-inch liquid petroleum, high pressure line, like it's like apples and oranges versus like what's constitutes safety buffers and stuff. So I think it's unfair to pick the worst case scenario and apply it to everyone, because that's basically everybody in the township. So there's just some things like that that's just really, really hard to, I get it, you want to get the safety thing, but I just worry about restricting homeowners.
yeah, and I struggle with that too, Mike. And the reason I left it like this is because the Mariner pipelines, they were oil pipelines.
Yeah, I know.
They were not they were just liquids, and now they're hazardous, flammable liquids. So under high pressure. So they've been converted, and now we have 2 new ones. So and that's the trend right now, is the oil lines are converting to high pressure gas, and to be on the safe side. But I see your point. Yeah. So we might define pipeline and hazard, the different hazard levels of pipelines.
Yeah, and I don't know if that can change, if the pipeline changes, if we can change the language, or, it's really hard to hit it because it's always moving. But not to like get even more in the weeds, and we can throw this. I'm just curious, like if you have like, if it's like overhead power lines or something, because a lot of times you'll see like overhead power lines, then there'll be gas lines ran through those easements. So I don't even know if anyone knows the answer. Can like utility companies like share easements where there may not be a gas line or even owned by a gas company, and then they just pick an easement that's pre-existing from any utility? Like, can that happen?
I'm not aware of the legal implications of that, but an easement, they typically have an easement already, and getting new ones, as we've found with Mariner, causes a lot of strife. So we don't see them getting new easements, but we have 11 pipelines in the township right now. And, they all have easements, and they all want to move their product. There's more and more gas product to move. So that's where the market is right now.
Yeah.
That's what they're looking to move.
But
Oh, yeah.
understand that what we're asking an applicant to do is a snapshot in time as the date that they're submitting their application for subdivision or land development. we're asking them to tell us through their plan document or their study what pipelines that are of public record and in the ground then, not ones that potentially may change or move in the future. It's when their application is filed and they're submitting their plan, as we're asking them to identify what's of public record that they know is out there.
Okay, understood. Thanks. And then one last, I guess, question. It would be, so what I learned from our calls here is that, I always assume like the easement was, also to protect like the owner of the easements, like, material, whatever you want to call it, like their material or their pipe. But it sounds like they can go right up to the edge of the easement. So if we're not talking like, blast zone, radius, all that kind of stuff, and we're just talking like, new construction that could like impede on the existing pipeline infrastructure, is there any process that they would be involved with? Like, could you drill like an 80-foot case on like 1 inch away from their easement? Like, or is there some step during the development process where that would get flagged?
Yes. So on top of the easements, outside of their easements, the property owner has setbacks. So they have their own property setbacks that they have to develop within in the building envelope. So if the easement runs through the middle of the property, they obviously don't have the right to develop there. So they'd be restricted from outside the easement. But yes, they can go right up to the edge. And I've had pipeline and property owners, work right up to the edge of that easement with pools, with sheds, not so much commercial, because that's pretty much done through the land development process. And once they're done, they don't build additions, but residential I've had those situations.
All right, and then the pipelines they don't have any say or anything then, since it's not.
Oh, they absolutely do.
Oh, they do?
Absolutely do. They watch you like a hawk. They stand there while you dig. Yep.
Okay. All right.
They don't want you in their easement, period.
Yeah.
Well, and another thing that's important to understand is that every easement document is different, and what you can and can't do within the confines of that easement depend upon what was negotiated by the grantor and grantee.
Okay, Mike, anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mike Cragnella, any questions or comments?
I had a couple questions. The first thing that jumped out at me was section A3 about demolition. What's the angle there? If you're going to bring a building down, you're ultimately going to put a new one up, assumably. So would you be hit twice for this, essentially?
Mark?
Yeah, so probably more for safety purposes, to ensure that, that they're aware of it. I mean, it's probably not in the right spot because we wouldn't get a land development application for a demo unless they were preparing to build something new right after they demoed that building. That would be, yeah.
Maybe a situation, Mark, though, that you have a large piece of land and part one existing, for example, in a corporate park, maybe there's a historic structure that's going to come down and there's a new building going to come up in a different location. So I think I don't have a problem with being here, but there may be, this reminds me that, in addition to saying, well, maybe a similar corresponding section would appear in your zoning ordinance.
Yes.
There may be a corresponding section that goes in when you have wherever your demolition permit sections are.
Yeah, it would have to, because, buried in the section way down here in 20540, you're not going to see that. But up in, I think we do have a permits required in the zoning ordinance, and we might want to put something there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think outside of the box a little bit because in my professional world, I do a lot of demolition and I submit a lot of demolition permits, and they typically go fast, as you guys know. And to go through this at that stage of the game would be a game changer. So I was thinking of that. something else that jumped out at me, I wanted to ask about. We've already touched on it a little bit, but Section B, subset B, the general description and the classification of the pipelines. And then Mark, I saw you had your notes up there. Assuming that is all public information, the applicant is still going to have to go to the utility provider. Are they going to be able to get all of that accurate information easily?
Yeah,
so to speak?
there is I think what we've listed there is readily available. But you're right. They may have to ask for that information. Again, thinking about this being an awareness ordinance and a planning tool for the Planning Commission during a land development or subdivision land development application, we wanted to get the applicant and the Planning Commission as aware of the pipelines near this development as possible. So with that said, that's why we added these sections here. But yes, you're right. There's those size, number, width of easement, materials. That's, and then, number 5 there probably needs a little bit of expertise.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I was trying to put myself in the shoes of the reviewer. If I were in Pannoni's shoes and I'm reviewing this, you would almost have to have the information already to ensure that the applicant captures it all. So I just think we need to think that through.
Well, they're going to be looking at a plan and they're going to say, okay, do they have the size of the pipes? Do they have the number of pipes? Do they have the width of the easement? Are the materials outlined in their study or their narrative? That maybe there's a narrative that's required. Maybe that's part of the standard. They provide a narrative. Maybe there's a standard that I've seen in other model ordinances that they have to send the plans and they have to get some kind of acknowledgement from the pipeline company that they've at least acknowledged receipt and have no comments. And then if you don't have anything within 30 days, you could, it could go off the best known information, because you're right. And Rick, township manager, will always tell me they don't have to tell you anything. So.
Okay.
Is that it, Mike?
Yes, sir.
John, any questions?
Yes. Should we define pipeline as trans-county pipelines so that we're only dealing with the big ones? Because all the ones we're talking about are the ones that run multiple counties, right?
Okay, yeah, we'll take a look at that, Mark.
Yeah, they're defined as interstate and intrastate, and that typically determines how they're regulated through the different federal standards and the federal, PUC. Obviously, the state has all kinds of requirements, and then FERC has all kinds of requirements, and then PHMSA has all the safety requirements. So,
well, just like the point that Mike had brought up about not dealing with the smaller.
Yeah, they're not considered pipelines. If you're talking like a 2-inch Pico main that goes through a subdivision or goes through a corporate park, that's not considered a pipeline. That's a service line. This isn't transporting liquids or gas through across from one station to another.
Okay.
It's raw material. It's not for use for commercial use at that point. Now,
Mark, sorry to interrupt, but what I think the kind of industry uses is transmission pipelines.
Transmission.
I think that's kind of seems to be the language that is used for this type of pipeline. So a service line such as some of them are, you mentioned 8 inches for the Pico gas lines that feed properties. So that isn't as a transmission line, a transmission pipeline. So I think, and we probably should verify that, but I think that's the term that we might want to look at.
Yeah, I think Pico, when we did that gas gate over there on 352, they called it they have a commercial line that comes off of there that then goes down 352 and then it goes down Paley Pike and then it keeps branching off. So, and it's used for commercial purposes and it goes to consumers.
Mhm.
Okay, that's good.
Just one other question. Mark, do you know if the county emergency management has a staff to look at these sort of submittals?
The County Planning Commission does have a pipeline office that they spun up when all this came about several years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe more. So, you know, they have limited experience, but more just to keep people informed of things that are going on. I don't know if the County Planning Commission will comment on those types of things. They may comment in more general purposes for pipeline safety, hazard mitigation. They do have, obviously, you know, the big hazard response unit over there. I don't think they would get involved in reviewing a development plan, though.
Okay. That's all I have.
John? Okay, most of the questions I have were answered. I just had two that I just want to personally comment on. I'm not sure the 1,000 feet. I think we still need to work through what that right number is. I got some ideas on that, but I think I want to think more on that and do some more reading. But I think we need to come up with the right number there, and it might be a matter of where we think the most problems would be. For example, I keep bringing up at the shopping center next to the retirement village, or where it was it? I keep calling it Giardi's. It's not Giardi's. Whatever all this.
Giant in Wellington.
Giant, yeah. If that shopping center were to go, we'd want to mitigate kind of. We want to have not mitigate. We want to make sure we have controls on what would go in there. You know, because if it was another nursing home or a school, this is kind of like addressing that type of stuff. So I think just need to look at this the distance. I don't think that issue we got to get to the bottom of. And then
So you're thinking, how do we regulate redevelopment of existing properties within some
subdivision and land
distance?
development. Yeah, and what I'm looking at is, you know, the main issue is here where there's 11 pipelines go, and there's really the main issue is like in a residential area, most of that's probably built out and maybe is not going to be subdivided. Maybe it is. There's only a few spots where there's a large amount of land that may be an issue where you could put a building up that really would need to have what we're trying to address from a realistic standpoint. Like, you know, does it make sense to put another old folks nursing home or a major school right, like, for example, right in that same location I keep bringing up? Does it make sense to do that? And if they were going to do that, how do we mitigate the impact? Okay. So when we really get down to it, I'm just trying to see how can you maybe word this, and maybe the distance isn't the way to do it. Maybe there's some better words to do that, to where the issues that we're most concerned with can make sure they get addressed. And that's my point. So I'm not sure I understand how I want to do that yet, but I think it's a good start. We can go from there. Does that answer your question, Mark? Okay. The other question I had in B2, it looks like you're upgrading. We had B2 and B3. I'm not sure if that couldn't be combined, or we'll work through that, but at this point, I think it's fine the way it is. And then I think you already added it. Yeah, the emergency vehicle access to that last line. I'm sure we'll come up with some other stuff, but that emergency vehicle access I thought was important.
Yeah, probably like turning templates.
Yes. For example, you know, can the biggest ladder truck we have actually get into the access without having to go on the pipeline side of it? So, for example, like what's the current old folks nursing home there?
Wellington or Bellingham?
Wellington. For example, you know, how would you get a large ladder truck if the pipeline had an issue? How would you get the largest ladder truck in the back end of that? Okay, I don't think there's an access right there to it, but that's what's more concerned to me.
There's
okay.
access on 2 sides, but 3 sides,
Yeah,
but not the very back. You're right.
Not the back. That's correct. I think they could get in there. I don't have, I know they can get in. I've driven on the fire trucks. I know it's easy enough to get in there. We cut through a couple fences and what have you, but that's something you'd want to not be, it's something you want to have easier access than something you have to do physically to get in there. Okay, so before I open it up to the public, what I'd like to do is just, I think this is a good discussion. I got almost 8 items marked. I'll type up. One of them has to do with the PE and A. The second question has to do with what Chris was talking about. What do you do with this study when it's done? My third question has to do with the conditional use area. I'll type these up for you. The fourth one was a change in use, that discussion that I think Dan brought up. The fifth one was emergency management review. I think John and somebody else brought that up. What that would, maybe we require, like as part of that hazard mitigation, does it get an emergency management review? The sixth one I have was defining what we mean by pipeline. Seventh I have as, and Ruth, I'll email, when I send these questions to Mark, I'll email it to everyone and you, Ruth.
Okay, thank you.
7, is this A3 really in the right spot? And should there be something in the cross-reference to the demolition? And the last thing I had was 8 was the B1B, where I think you already got it, Mark, where you're making it more specific than general. Okay. So that's some first cut, some good input. I'll type that up and then we'll see what we add from the public discussion. So at this point, I will open up the public. And I think Christine, you had some comments you wanted to make.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Ernie. I appreciate the discussion that has been going on tonight. It's been very educational for me and very interesting to listen to. I am encouraged by everything that people are saying. I'm happy to see all the work that's going into this. I would just add a few comments about the professional engineer requirement that was talked about earlier. I would suggest that you just add the words a PA licensed engineer in there. The reason why I'm saying that is because in all of the dealings that we've had with DEP and Sunoco and the sites located here in East Goshen, specifically Bowtree, in all of the documents that Sunoco was required to submit to the state repeatedly asked for their reports to be signed by a professional licensed engineer and a licensed geologist. And repeatedly, Sunoco did not meet that requirement. But what they did was a very sly dance in describing the qualifications of the person who was writing these reports. How they had, years of experience in, engineering and geology and all this kind of stuff, but they were never really able to meet that requirement. So the key word is license, and I would insist on a PA license engineer. And you can also, to get around this, specializing in pipeline design and pipeline hazard mitigation, maybe require a certification in those specialized fields. That's just one suggestion. The other thing was that it was very interesting hearing the dialogue that was going on. These are many of the topics that we talk about during our pipeline task force meetings. And so I was just wondering if you could kindly circulate this document to our chairperson so that we could also maybe discuss it, offer some recommendations. Is that something that would be amenable to you, Ernie?
I told you we can do that, Christine. I said we work with your task force. If that, let us get it to a state where we have, let us get some of the harder stuff answered so we got something that's some meat, and get it more cleaned up and as a draft, and we can get that to you.
Okay, I would like to just formally request that on this issue and on future pipeline related issues that we continue to work in a more collaborative issue, formalized way. And I would always continue.
This topic's been on their agenda, on the Planning Commission's agenda for the last 12 months.
I understand that, Mark, but it's just a little bit difficult when, for instance, like this ordinance originated in the pipeline, that the concept of the setback ordinance originated in the pipeline task force. And the whole idea was for it to be a collaborative effort between the two groups. And Ernie very graciously offered to take it to the Planning Commission and to work with it there. But it was quite a surprise when it showed up on the Board of Supervisors agenda. And so I would just like to, whenever there are pipeline issues like that, that we continue to work together, and that, you know, at least the courtesy of an email or a heads up or something like that. It was a surprise to me when I saw it on the agenda today. So I would like to see more synergy. Today's agenda, this agenda today.
Yeah, this topic has been on the Planning Commission's agenda for nearly a year or more. We've been talking about pipelines, and this is the first time you've been with us for, I don't know, 9 months.
That is not true. I've joined meetings before. I joined them in person.
Well,
I've come in person,
I don't think it's fair to say that there hasn't been a collaborative effort, because, you know, it's been on the agenda. These are all public meetings, and the Planning Commission has been working hard on this. And, you know, now we're back to a new suggestion by the board. So Planning Commission takes direction from the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, so noted, Christine. I had that noted. Thank you. Any other comments, Christine?
That was it for the professional engineer. I just wanted
I have a question on the professional engineer.
Yeah.
I know for the pipelines, it's probably not required to be a PA state because of the interstate stuff. But Mark, if we have work done in the township or in the state, doesn't it have to be a engineer licensed in Pennsylvania to stamp those drawings?
100% every single time.
I thought so.
So it's good to reiterate it. Not a problem. It's all right. I typed it in. So
okay, because I think it's in the state. I think it's in the state. I know the states that I'm licensed in, I have to, if I'm going to do work in those states, that's why I got licensed in multiple states. I have to be registered in those states. So, okay.
Yes, and the documents that were required by the state, specifically DEP, not only required that they be a licensed PE, but also they had to include their seal on the documents.
Right. Okay. Anything else, Christine?
That's it for tonight.
Okay. Is there any other public comment? Okay. Mark, I will type up the questions I have in the notes. I'll send it to you, and I'll send it to the rest of the commission and Ruth, just so documentation of it. And what I'd like to do is we'll work on making these changes, and we can put this on next month's agenda too, and see how we transgress. I think we've got it far enough along. I think in the next month or two, we should be able to get it fairly close that we can put this out and see if we can bring it to approval, correct?
yeah, no, I think between you and I getting our comments in there, and then we'll bounce it over to Kristen to, you know, smooth out the edges for us and make any comments she might have, and then we can look at it again and we'll get it on the January agenda. That should be much cleaner. I think I have 10 items. I've already made a few adjustments here, so. It's a
Okay.
good start.
Yeah, I have 8, possibly 9. Okay, so you want to wait till the January agenda, or do you want to look at this in December? I'm sorry, this is December. Excuse me.
Hard to believe it's on us already.
Yeah.
I think I've had too much turkey. Okay, so yeah, if we can go on the January agenda, that'd be fine. Okay, any other? I have no other comments on this subject.
I just have
go
one
ahead.
question, Ernie.
Who's that?
This is Eddie, and this is
I'm
all.
sorry, go ahead.
Mark, is there any way that you could send out your red line document?
Absolutely. Yep.
Oh,
Yep. Definitely. I'll send it out right now.
Okay.
Hey, Mark,
right,
include me on that, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Kristen, thank you for attending. I appreciate all the effort. The only else I'm going to talk on the agenda has to do with our goals. And if the people want to leave, that's fine. Thank you for all the input. I appreciate it.
Okay, have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
You.
Thanks.
thank you.
Okay. Last thing we have on the agenda is goals. And I think we put the goals out last meeting to start reviewing it. And we have a meeting. You should have gotten it today. We have a meeting. Did everyone get this memo from Susan?
Yeah.
The annual planning session is going to be January 26th at 6:30. It's going to be remote. And it's to really set up our goals like we did last year. And there's a possibility I may not make this meeting again for 2 years in a row. But what I'd like to do, here's the way I'd like to handle this, is I'm going to go through the goals from 2020 and where I think their status is. And as I go through that, we can discuss that. And then I'd like to, between now and the January meeting, come up with ideas for 2021 goals. And we'll go through them at the January meeting, finalize them for our goals meeting on the 26th. Okay. So if you have in front of you the 2020 goals for Planning Commission, the first one was continue support for the following comprehensive plan implementing strategies. Does everybody have what I'm reading to, I assume?
Yes.
Or Mark, you can put it up, one or the other.
I don't have it. If you're able to put it up on the screen, that'd be helpful to me.
Which one did you want to put up? One.
Planning Commission. I mean, I could put up goals for the other ones, but there you go.
No, I wanted to make sure I had the right document.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
So the first one there, the objectives 6.1 and 6.2, I think we've done as much as we can there. That's with the Board of Supervisors. And that also goes for 6.3.
Well, 6.3 we haven't really done anything with. Westchester Pike Corridor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I read that wrong.
That's another functional study that I think we'd have to do.
Yeah.
So, and in this budgetary restrictive environment we have right now, we've cut all the planning money out. So we don't have any funds to do any significant planning.
Okay. Okay. You know, and that's 7.2 also, right? The next one.
It is.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't have that one status. Okay.
9. Expanding open space, right?
The 9.1, maintaining, expanding the open space, recreation, and trails network. I think it's still in progress, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Planning Commission always will always be open to anything that could expand those things, but it's all about funding at this point. So, and you typically have to plan that stuff in order to get it approved and get funding through any funding sources.
So the next two, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This might be a topic to take offline, but any funding that came in past, I guess, past fiscal budgets, maybe from the state, what's going on with them? So, I'm thinking Reservoir Road, dam project that we had received matching funding for, and there was funding allocated for construction. And obviously with the pandemic, things like that were halted. Is that, are those kind of just, is everything being pushed back a year, or are they being looked at again in another way?
Right, so Reservoir Road, so that funding, and that permit is still ongoing. We're still trying to secure the permits there. For that, we just finished, our consultant just finished the conditional letter map amendment for FEMA. That will be submitted. In fact, I just signed the check the other day to send that off. So so that's ongoing. Still in the planning phase there. The Hershey's Mill Road Dam, that one is underway. If you've been by, you've seen the equipment that's already been moved in there. We've got our whole parking area and staging area. The dam should be out by, I thought it was December 15th.
Oh, wow.
With the big rains that we had, it may slow that down because we have water behind the dam now. So, and really wet conditions. So, obviously there's going to be some slip with weather, but by the end of the year, the dam's supposed to be out. So, and then they'll start, if you've been up there, take a ride up there during daylight and you'll see it looks a lot different. They've removed a lot of trees as required, off the dam and off the edge of the road for the parking area, and it's moving forward. So we have all the permits, and the contractor's been awarded the bid and everything. So
Excellent.
Hey, so all that work, Mark, is that all by East Coast, not that new homeowner then?
So that's all East Goshen property. Yeah.
Okay.
The new homeowner, they did buy the mill dam, the mill house right there at the dam, and he's putting tons of money into it. So
Nice.
yeah, they're really young couple, just had a baby, and they took on this huge money pit, but
God bless them all.
they fell in love with it, and he has a really good plan to get it right. So, but yeah, everything else is all our contractor doing the work. East Goshen employees won't be doing that dam removal.
That's good.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay. So I think we can status 9.1 and 9.2 still is in progress, correct?
Yeah, still open. Yep.
The next one, the business park revitalization, I think we've really completed, kind of completed that with regard to, we've got that task force started.
True. The task force been created.
Right.
Thank you for your volunteering to work on that. I think they have a tentative meeting date already scheduled.
Yeah.
Correct.
And then the last one I think is really kind of tied to that, only in that I'll update that and say we selected to do business park and kind of I districts first, and I think that's tied in with the task force. So I'll update the last one to tie that in and then I'm gonna leave part of that to see if there's other districts you want to look at, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if the business park stuff gets moved over and they're going to kind of champion the I and the BP, maybe the planning commission could focus on another section of the zoning. Is that where you're heading?
That's where I'm headed. Yeah, that's where I'm headed.
Good. We can talk offline and see what you want to do, and we can get something together for January, at least to start your reading and thinking about it if you want.
Okay. And then the middle one, there's the support board of supervisor review of zoning ordinance support pipeline. Obviously, I think that's in progress and close to completion or close to some endpoint anyway. Everybody agree with that?
Yep.
I agree.
Yep.
Okay. What I'll do is I will type up, I'll type this up with a status, send it to everyone, Ruth also, with a stat. Actually, I might hold this back. This doesn't have, Ruth, you can just put in the minutes that we status the stuff and went over it, and we'll be getting ready to close them out and issue the new ones in January. I don't think you need to get into detail what we're doing with these on the minutes. But that's up to you. But I'll type what the stats we have, and then if any suggestions for next year, either get to me, or if you want to bring them up now, we can start on what is next year. But right now, I think part of the ones next year is going to be the 9-1, 9-2, and then the pipeline ordinance, and then the other districts. I'm not.
That's
I don't have anything.
That's enough to chew, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what else. Besides, I'm not sure what else.
I think that's a big bite to chew. So
Yeah.
that.
Well, the other thing too is if we do get off this Zoom, if we ever get out of Zoom jail, I think hopefully the Board of Supervisors is going to go back with the TND and what have you. I'm sure that's going to be a lot of work to support that effort if it actually goes through.
Yeah, the way they left that was they wanted to see how the trail turned out, and CD&E in front of the building here. We'll go through our final traffic signal inspection on Friday, and F&G also traffic signal inspection on Fridays, and we also have on Monday we have our final DEP walkthrough for closing out our MPDS permit. So, and the grass came in. Thankfully, we got it in just in time. So it's not all going to wash away on us. But if you haven't been out on,
I wouldn't be too sure about that. The animals in my backyard are starting to line up by twos.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll get this. Let me clean this up, and I'll get it out to everyone, to Mark, and then we can finalize this at the January Planning Commission meeting. And I might need someone, if I can't make the meeting, or someone who, if anybody would like to go or represent the Planning Commission, you're more than welcome to do that. I think John did it for us the last meeting in January this year.
Mike did it, yeah. He did a good
Mike
job.
did, okay.
Oh yeah, Joel was there too. Yeah, I remember. It was
Okay.
back when we could meet in person.
Ernie,
Yes.
ask a question, Ernie. So from our pipeline, just get my train of thought here. So we're going to look at possibly finalizing a draft for this pipeline ordinance that we reviewed here today, the hazard plan here, planning process. We're going to get that. We're going to then distribute that out to the pipeline task force and ask for their input before we pass it on to the Board of Supervisors. Is that what we're going to end up doing here, or how's that process? Have you thought that
I don't
through?
think I need them for their approval. I think that it's in the planning meetings. They're aware they can look at it, and I can send it to them, but I'm not sure they need to be in line for any approval for this.
I wasn't looking for their approval. I was looking for their input.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll make sure that they get the stuff. I mean, the stuff's there. I look at their planning commission agenda every month. I read all their planning commission, I look at all their pipeline task force agenda every month. I go through it. If there's something on there that I think we need to address, I go to their meetings. So, I mean, I'm taking the effort to go and actively look at that. And they could do the same on our stuff. It's just a matter of reading the agenda and go looking at it if they're interested. But I'll make it a point that they know it's out there, and if they want to comment, they can comment. They
Yeah,
can get
I
on
just
the
was
meeting
curious
and
what your
comment.
plan was. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've been as accommodating as I could possibly be for this whole request, and I don't think it's been an easy request, to be quite frank with you. But that's neither here nor there. Any other comments? Okay, I owe you folks cleaned up notes on this for the goals. I'll have that to you probably in a couple days here. And that's all I had on this issue, unless anyone else had any comments or questions. Okay, going down the agenda, is there any other matter that someone wants to bring up?
So
Mark, I'm sorry,
did you mention the date, Ernie, for that?
for what, the goals?
January 26th.
At 6:30,
At
18:30.
6:30. Okay. If anyone, and do we have a point person for that? Are you going to get with them offline once you have your thoughts together and all that?
We'll have a point person by the
We
end
have,
of the
we have one
January
more
meeting.
month. That's right. We
Right.
have another January month. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was my point, is to finish this up next meeting. So I want this to be on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
This and the pipeline, pipeline ordinance.
Once you have your draft together or whatever, you get it to me and I'll get it in there.
I'm gonna send you the questions that came up and you can work on how we want to answer those.
Okay.
And I'll give what I have for suggested answers. I'll get that to you. Okay, I have a question, Mark, with regard to the pipeline. I'm confused. Maybe you can give us an update. When they say, I think I read where the only last pull is from Simon and Jude out to Bow Tree. Is that correct?
Yes. I'm not
Okay.
sure the direction
When
they're pulling her, but yeah, that's the last
I'm
one.
sorry. Okay. When I go by the CVS, that pipe is sticking up in the air.
Mhm.
Is there something going to be pulled to connect to that?
So it's like you're a submariner, right?
Yeah.
You dive like that, right? And that's the way
Right.
it goes. So once it comes up out of the ground, now they got another pipe over here. So now they're going to cut them off and they're going to connect them underground.
Okay.
So that's just
Okay.
that's just the dry pipe sticking out of the ground. They're going to get cut off, connected with all the appropriate valves, whatever they're going to do there. I don't know what they do.
Okay. So there's just one last section to go.
Yeah. So they basically get them all pulled through. Then they're cleaning up the site. They're doing all kinds of stuff, and they'll dig the big trench and they'll start the connection of those two lines.
Okay. All right, good. Well, now that you let everyone know, as a submariner, there's only two types of ships in the Navy, right? Submarines and targets. I don't think we have a liaison for a liaison report. Do you have anything, Mark, or was anything given to you?
No, I mean, so the board met last night and they have the draft budget up on the website on the 15th of December. They will consider it and take it under a vote. They considered it about 3 weeks ago, and there was a lot of contention about still too much spending in there. We don't know what the next year will hold for us. So they went back and they deferred a bunch of spending, pushed it to 2022. A lot of that was like Bow Tree ponds, some other infrastructure work, some park stuff. But anyway, so they deferred a lot of that and got the budget back down where the deficit is only like $180,000 or something like that. And it was much higher. So the board's much more comfortable about that. So that's the 15th. If you're interested in that, it's on the website, up for public inspection, and you can ask your questions on the 15th. Pretty much that was the big ticket item last night. That and they decided to fund the Malvern Library at $22,500, which is I believe the same as 2019. And there's some discussion about the pipeline. As you know, there's suspected subsidence near one of the Bow Tree entrances, and we're trying to determine how we're gonna work through that. PennDOT's supposedly going to come out and take a look. They're doing some survey work, and then if it's in the right of way, they will do some test holes and try to determine what the subsidence is, if there is any. And so
What is subsidence?
So it's where there's a depression in the ground where someone seems to think that there might be a sinkhole forming of some type.
Okay.
Like mine subsidence, ever hear that term?
Okay.
So, that's about it from the board. Conservancy board didn't really have anything going on. and I don't know of any applications coming. The Hankin property that was in the corporate park they were talking about building apartments. Hankin has put that on the market, and they have supposedly they have a buyer. That's all we know. So.
Oh, they're selling the property?
Mhm. Yep, they put it on the market, I think around Veterans Day, early November. And so they already have.
Okay. Thank you.
I would just like to clarify, Mark, it's not that somebody thinks that there's a depression there. It was a Sunoco whistleblower. It was their own geologist
Okay, right.
who's contacted there. Thank you.
Okay. Any other announcements, Mark?
That's all I have, sir.
Okay, before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I just want to thank everybody for the work that we did this year. I know it's been a crazy year, and I wish you all have a happy holiday. We won't be together until the holiday because I don't believe we need a working meeting. So I hope you have all safe and happy holiday and wish you the best. And it's been a tough year, but I appreciate all the support you've given and provided to the Planning Commission. And with that, does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
Motion
I'll
to
make it.
adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion
you.
adjourned. Thank you very much. Meeting over.
Thanks.
Happy
everyone.
holidays,
everyone.
Happy
Happy
New Year.
holidays.
Hi, folks.
Happy New Year's.
Have a good holiday.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Likewise.